全であるということは確認をいたして。
A US judge will meet behind closed doors on Friday to discuss the process for refunding up to $175 billion in illegally collected tariffs. Judge Richard Eaton of the US Court of International Trade will meet with government lawyers to work out a refund plan for over 300,000 importers after the tariffs were declared unconstitutional last month. The refund process is unprecedented and will require a manual review of tens of millions of tariff payments. The case, initiated by Atmos Filtration, is set to shape how refunds will be handled for thousands of other cases, potentially offering a quicker resolution for importers without requiring further litigation. We are now being rejoined again by Dr. Ajay Dua. Thank you for joining us back here for this. What is the significance of a judge calling for these tariff refunds tied to Trump's actions? And how might this signal the strength of the legal challenges that the US is undergoing? And how could this outcome of this settlement process affect US businesses and consumers who have been paying higher tariffs?
Thank you for calling me back into this on this discussion. I think it's very significant. If you would recall, when about 20 days ago, or 20 odd days ago, the US Supreme Court had ruled by a verdict, a 6-3 verdict, that President Trump's actions of levying tariff were not legal, or probably, I think they used the word unconstitutional. It had left open the question of what happens to the tariffs which have already been collected since President Trump's second term began, and the month of April, I think, he revised the tariffs, including when he brought up the Liberation Day tariffs. Before that, he had levied already flat 10% tariff on all the imports coming into the US, and from the Liberation Day onwards, he started off country by country revision upwards of the tariffs. The Supreme Court, however, had not taken a call on what happens to the tariffs, whether it's $160 billion or $175 billion. There are estimates that it could even be over $200 billion. The fact remains, whatever be the number, the fact remains that it is a huge sum the US government has able to collect. So, and it was probably rightly that the case was taken up immediately at the lower levels, lower than the Supreme Court, to decide whether I don't think the judge yesterday mentioned how. The question was the process. How do the people who have paid, the importers who have paid the duty, get it back? And he's now called both the sides. That means the US Treasury and the Commerce Ministries, probably Commerce departments of the US, as well as the importers who have paid the duty, to work it out. The US government has already made a statement before, it had made a statement before yesterday's decision of the court, that it's not returnable. So I think that was probably a starting point, and we shouldn't be surprised if President Trump says it's not, or his administration says that it's not returnable, because this money is coming very handy for the US to ensure that the inflation in the country as a result of the higher tariffs paid by the importers does not cause too much of an inflation, and he's been able to use this money for other budgetary purposes, as well as giving relief to certain sectors and certain segments of the society. But the fact remains that if a thing is illegal, has no legal basis, and that's what has been said, that unless President Trump seeks and obtains the U.S. Congress's approval, the whatever action is taken under the name of under IEEPA, the emergency powers which vest in the president in the case of a national emergency, that those are not valid. I would say that it's going to be it will be hotly contested. On one side, the importers demanding it, importers and the governments which have been impacted, consequently the foreign governments, they would be supporting, because they have to, more than a refund, they actually are seeking to make a point, and including India, saying that President Trump, you cannot levy arbitrarily, arrive at a figure and levy this, and without your being empowered, and with what kind of shackles the Congress imposes these or allows him to do it, is to be seen. So for future trade deals, for future actions by U.S. President, the decision of yesterday's decision of the judge is highly significant, and I do hope that he doesn't go into the constitutionality or the legality once again of a matter which has already been kind of ruled by the Supreme Court, that he would confine himself to the process and installments, etc. If the U.S. government seeks how these refunds could be effected without at all questioning or making any observation whatsoever about the legality of the issue, since it stands settled.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajay Dua, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. US Senator Mark Wayne Mullin of Oklahoma has been elected by US President Donald Trump as his nominee for the next Homeland Security Secretary. Responding to the nomination, Mullin has said that his top priority would be to focus on protecting the United States and securing its borders. Mullin has also commented on Kristi Noem, who was removed from her position by President Donald Trump. He has acknowledged her efforts in the role, saying that she had done her best under difficult circumstances. Let's now listen in to more of his statements.
Yes, I'm a Republican. Yes, I'm conservative. But the Department of Homeland Security is to keep everybody, regardless if you support me, if you don't support me, regardless of what your thoughts are. I'm here to enforce the policies that Congress passed, and right now I'm part of it, but once I make that transition, my focus is to keep the homeland secure. That's going to be my focus, and we're super excited about this opportunity. I was excited. The president, first of all, the president, I have a really good relationship. We talk all the time anyways. I've got to be honest with you, I wasn't expecting the call today, but super excited. And I'm more excited about just ready to get started. There's a lot of work we can do to get the Department of Homeland Security working, working for the American people. The Department of Homeland Security has a very broad jurisdiction. And I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, and I'm excited.
Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto has reassured local Islamic groups that he will withdraw from US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace if it does not benefit Palestinian interests. The decision to join the board and contribute troops for a Gaza stabilization force has faced criticism at home, particularly from Muslim groups. President Prabowo met with leaders of Islamic groups on Thursday, stating he would withdraw if the platform no longer serves Palestine or Indonesia's national interests. The Indonesian Ulama Council had already called for exiting the board due to the US role in the Iran conflict. We're now being joined by Professor Rohan Gunatna, who's an international affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. So obviously we've heard a lot about the Board of Peace, and now Indonesia is saying it may withdraw from the US, from the US-led Board of Peace if it doesn't benefit Palestinians. Does this signal growing skepticism among global South countries especially about these peace initiatives led by Donald Trump?
Ellie, as you said, the US-Israel war against Iran has created some unhappiness among the Muslim groups in Indonesia. And that is why President Prabowo Subianto met with the Indonesian Islamic groups and gave them an assurance that unless it is in the interest of Indonesia or the Palestinians, that he will withdraw. But I want to share with you that it is unlikely that he will withdraw, because one is that President Prabowo is very keen for Indonesia to play a bigger role, not only in the ASEAN countries, but also globally, as Indonesia is the largest Muslim country. Second is this agitation and unhappiness is largely because of the war. And I believe that in the coming weeks, that the conditions will once again emerge for the Gaza peace plan to be revisited, because at this point there is no progress in the Gaza peace process because of the war with Iran. And during that time, President Prabowo will most likely come back and explain to the Islamic groups that it is in the interest of Indonesia and also the Palestinians that Indonesia play a very important role in the international stabilization force.
And with discussions on the peace initiative reportedly paused due to what's going on in the Middle East with US, Israel and Iran, does this highlight how the broader Middle East conflicts is undermining international peace frameworks?
Very much. As you mentioned, the conflict in the Middle East has had an impact on the peace process. So with regard to Gaza, phase 1 is release of all hostages that Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the other terrorist groups have done. Now phase 2 is the disarmament phase. This is the most difficult phase. So I believe that this particular topic of disarmament will be revisited in the coming weeks. And at that point, there will be greater commitment on the part of a number of countries that have committed troops to form the contingent in Gaza that will maintain peace, and that will also ensure the disarmament of the terrorist groups in Gaza, because without disarmament, there'll be no peace process.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure speaking with you as always.